Really disappointed that our franchise, that my franchise, that stuff like that was going on, and it's very sad and disappointing. But I think Mark is trying to step up and lead this franchise in the right direction, and that is hiring investigators, finding out all the little details that we have to know as a franchise, what really was going on. And so I think Mark is gonna step up here and find answers.
In case you're just joining us, Dirk not proud of how the Mavs and Mark Cuban handled the reported culture of misogyny and predatory behavior within the organization detailed by Sports Illustrated article. Cuban said it was his final decision to keep Earl K. Snead, a Mavs beat reporter, after 2 separate instances of alleged domestic violence, but also acknowledges it was a horrible mistake. In hindsight, we also have the Turdima Ussery investigation and the HR executive Buddy Pittman in question as well. Max, I want to start with you. What should the NBA do about this situation, or should they do anything?
Well, listen, I don't want to make an equivalency between Mark Cuban, who I've liked whenever I've interacted with him through the years, and Donald Sterling, for example. But let's assume for a second that Mark Cuban is not the instigator of the kind of Silicon Valley bro culture on the Mavericks. Whether or not he seems to be the kind of guy that people think, oh, he might be that way or he might not. Let's just assume that he's not the catalyst for that culture. Because if he is, then the league has to really seriously look into whether he should be an NBA owner. And you give Mark Cuban the benefit of the doubt. I'd like to, and say no, that's not what this is. This is a case of him not being aware enough of what was going on in his own organization. But boy, that's really unaware. First, you hire the executive, that is the culprit. Then you hire the head of HR, who is there to act as a failsafe for the executive, who seems to be a danger to himself and others, and especially others, I mean his own job security, and the organization. And HR was a poor hire, obviously, as well, because there are reports that multiple people, male and female, did not feel comfortable coming to the head of HR with problems involving Ussery, right? So that's 2 right there. He has recently admitted to more mistakes, to another mistake involving domestic violence, and an employee, etc. So if you give Mark Cuban the benefit of the doubt and say he's not, Russ Hanneman, the character on Silicon Valley, the HBO show, is only loosely based on Mark Cuban, the 3 commas guy, the billionaire, 3 commas, the 3 commas club guy. That's loosely based on Mark Cuban. There is a sense that there's a kind of Silicon Valley bro thing about him, but that doesn't mean he's a bad guy or he's the instigator of a pernicious culture on the Mavs. Assuming he's not, then he has another problem, a much less serious problem, but that is his own kind of, the image that he has put out there, which is that he's a hands-on, knows what's going on in the trenches kind of guy. Because the best thing, the kindest interpretation of these events is he's not.
Let me answer 2 questions. Number 1, how much did Mark Cuban know? And number 2, what should happen? First of all, regarding how much did Mark Cuban know? Let's set aside, and I heard you guys talking about this earlier, the Earl K. Snead part of this story. The Mavs.com writer that Mark Cuban has admitted he made a mistake.
That's right.
And by the way, he admitted essentially 2 mistakes. 1, not getting into the dirty details of knowing exactly what was behind the story.
Correct.
And number 2, making a bad call and letting the guy stay on at the
That's
staff.
right.
But the one, and you said this earlier, Stephen A., the real aspect that's the most damning is Turdima Ussery.
That's right.
18 years inside the Mavericks organization. By the account of SportsIllustrated.com, 18 years of, I don't know what the right word to use is, terror.
Serial harasser.
Harasser of women inside that
And
organization.
assaulter.
I'm a Mavericks fan. I'm a Mark Cuban fan. It stretches logic and credibility to think Mark Cuban could not know something about this. It just truly does.
Right.
But here's the key, guys. How much did he know? When I owned businesses in Texas, I had an employee walked out by the sheriff in handcuffs. I was blown away. What did this guy do? Turns out it was theft. Not from me, from someplace else. I was blown away. There's no way I could have known this guy was doing this. Now, I also wasn't completely like, his character, at times, I'd had questions about. And you and I were talking, you always or know a little something, but rarely do you know it
Listen,
all.
Bill Belichick with Aaron Hernandez said it all. What I'm saying, with the Aaron Hernandez case, who the hell knew all of that was happening?
But what should the NBA do? Let me tell you something. We're going to have to draw lines, Max, because you brought up Darnell Sterling, Jerry Richardson in the NFL. Let me just tell you this. There are no clear lines right now on when a team or property is taken away from an owner. And right now, the major driving force the only consistency I can see is the level of outrage within the mob. How mad are we? If we're going to go after Mark Cuban, we're going to need to establish what our principles are, what he violated, and how much he knew. We're going to have to nail all of that down because I'm extremely uncomfortable. Every time we're mad, we run to take away the franchise.
Absolutely. I don't know. I have no disagreement with that. I certainly don't feel like Mark Cuban should have to give up the franchise unless we find out that he was somebody that was completely and totally complicit in everything that transpired. But it would take that to warrant him being bounced out as an owner for an NBA franchise. I think that Mark Cuban clearly dropped the ball. I don't think there's any way around that. But again, to what degree? And that's what we've got to find out as it pertains to him. All I can tell you is that people who cover the NBA that know Mark Cuban, everything that you hear about him, like you said, you do hear about him being hands-on. But in terms of hand-picking individuals, allocating responsibility to those individuals, having faith that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, et cetera, et cetera. And if you don't, he will get rid of you. He is about his business. Now, in the case of Ussery, let's keep in mind, Princeton grad, his resume, I mean, just off the charts when you consider what he accomplished, when you consider the fact that he facilitated the transition from Mark Cuban being a fan to becoming an owner of the Dallas Mavericks to elevating them to heights that ultimately enabled them to capture a championship. Remember, a reputable company like Under Armour came clamoring for Ussery, okay? Hired them. Problem is, in 2 months,
2 months,
they said, oh, you got to get up out of here.
Right.
And if they discovered something in 2 months, chances are Dallas knew something over 18 years, and that's where you got a problem.
And it also brings up...
Because I heard you guys earlier discuss this, and I want to take issue with one thing you said, Max. It's actually issue with something that came up in the Sports Illustrated article, and you seem to find worth underlining today on the program. This idea that the HR department's problem at the Dallas Mavericks was that the head of HR was socially conservative. I don't understand the relevance of that whatsoever. I don't understand.
It's not about being socially conservative.
Hold on, I don't understand why somebody...
Let him finish, Max. Let him finish, and then you'll go ahead.
It'll be quick. I don't understand how somebody's opinion on abortion or social conservatism or even their willingness to share that is somehow willingness to accept sexual harassment going on in the workplace. That's a tie that I think is completely inappropriate to make.
I'm not making it. The employees,
yes, I did.
Plural, male and female, are describing the way that made them feel, Will. You may not like it, but that's the way they, according to that report, felt. Also, his cubicle was out in the open, close to Ussery's office. They didn't feel that they were having private conversations. Also, he bristled at the idea of an openly gay player in the NBA. That's an HR, like, doing that in the workplace results in censure from HR, Will.
I'm not here to tell you he was good at his job. I think he's clearly culpable of this entire thing. I just don't know what his political beliefs have to do with any of it.
So that value, for example, sending around emails disapproving of the fact that there is an openly gay player in the league, those values, that kind of behavior is antithetical to the values of polite society, Will, whether you like it or not. Whether, you know, and by the way, antithetical to the NBA's values. Antithetical to the idea of especially ironic that the head of HR, of all people, would express those values publicly when he's there to make people feel comfortable coming to him with workplace issues. They're
also antithetical to my own personal views, but I would never suggest because he disagrees with me on a political issue, he was tolerant of sexual harassment.
I didn't suggest that either, Will.
It's not just you, Max. It's SI that you're jumping. You are saying the same thing SI said, though.
You're making that connection. You're saying the suggestion is, it appears to me, I'm inferring from what you're saying, that the suggestion is that those kind of social values, if espoused publicly, that they make others feel uncomfortable coming to you with sexual harassment problems, that doesn't add up logically. It may not rationally, but there's an emotional logic, and there were multiple men and women, apparently, who did feel that way.
We have to go, but I just have to say one thing. How do you not think it's inappropriate? Think of it if it's here. If an HR executive sends an email about a talent here at ESPN that's gay or in a gay marriage, and they're discussed with it, that's inappropriate in a workplace.
Agreed.
Okay.
But that has
Well,
no
that's what he
bearing on.
did.
But that has no bearing on whether or not he would have been receptive to sexual harassment claims. None.
But yes, it does, because people are
bad. I don't know,
Will,
uncomfortable
if you-
going to him. They're uncomfortable going to him. That is the point of your position, to be able to go and to be able to give your complaints and get those rectified.
You know, we're going to have to look at everybody's Facebook page now to see if they're really not sharing some political.
No,
beliefs.
this is workplace behavior we're talking
It's
about,
not
Will, not
politics.
Facebook. He's espousing these ideas in the workplace.
All
think they
right,
got you
I'm
on
being
that one.
told we got to go.
Workplace.
LeBron James doesn't like Adam Silver's playoff seeding idea. Hear what King James had to say about it. Plus, Drew Brees is a free agent, but how much money does he deserve on the open market? We'll debate it next.